Thanks, Helen. First, I want to ask about the activities of Actus, and if you tell us a few words about the services offered to the ship owners by Actus.
Okay. Well, Actus International Security provides peace of mind through effective maritime security. We supply former military-trained, armed and unarmed guards. Sorry. We also do risk assessments, which would actually start in a paper form, desk risk assessment for ships. That would then carry through to when we get on board a ship. We would carry an actual risk assessment on board the ship, check everything to do with the vessel, and then we would train the crew. All of our crew are fully trained currently to IMO standards, and we check all of our crew to British standards, as well as just doing standard police checks. We go beyond that, check into their background very substantially. We also would check for any mental health issues with our crew as well, from their past, with their doctors and all that sort of thing. And we hope that obviously that gives us a really strong team that we're working with, and we would prevent the hijackings of vessels as a result of it.
In which areas around the world is Actus able to provide protection?
Actus is able to provide protection at the moment in East Africa and also in West Africa. In West Africa, that is done in conjunction with navies there. Mm-hmm. We act as a consultancy. Quite often we would suggest to shipping companies there that they would use the naval presence as an escort vessel alongside us, liaising between the master and them, not to avoid any unnecessary firefights and things like that.
Now we'll show areas like Nigeria.
Yes, that's Nigeria.
There.
Yeah.
Can you act in that area, especially in
Yes, we can. Yeah, especially in Nigeria, we've brokered a deal with the Navy there, and that's where we would act. That's where, exactly just describing West Africa, we would act as a consultancy with the shipping company, because obviously you've seen the statistics that attacks are going up there, and whilst they're not using the Somalian ransom, they're stealing oil and things. They have a market to be able to sell those products. So they're going on taking oil off and selling it on the black market in Nigeria. So it's just a big problem. It's just they're not actually holding things to ransom for X amount of months.
Are ships with armed protection the answer to stop piracy?
Well, I think it's a combination of things to stop piracy. I think shippers can do a lot for themselves. Most shipping companies, know about BMP4. They can work with that to try and stop the boarding itself. They can also make manoeuvres, change lanes, don't stick to shipping lanes and all that sort of thing. There's obviously naval presence in the area, which can help as well. But ultimately, at the moment, no pirates have got on with armed guards. So I think it's a combination of all of those things working together that helps. Pirates are opportunists at the end of the day, and it's a little bit like if your house is all locked up and all your windows are closed and bolted, and the house next door's windows are open, they're going to go for the house with the windows open they can climb into easily. And I think what armed guards do is prevent them from they look up at that ship, see the guards, move on to the next one.
But during its latest report, the International Maritime Bureau said that reported piracy attacks are failing. Is this case according, and why has this happened?
Why are they failing, or why are they dropping?
Failing.
I think there's a combination of things. I think that shippers are a lot more aware of pirates and how to try and avoid them. Mm-hmm. I think the use of armed guards has helped a lot in that area, and also the interaction between the shipping, the security, and the naval forces in the area, all combining together, has really helped to make it not as successful as it has been in the past. What is quite interesting about the figures at the moment, though, that they're still about the same as they were in 2008. Oddly, there was a spike sort of last year. But you bear in mind the figures we stand with today are the reason why the insurance company made the high risk zone on a chart and mapped it all out. So the problem I wouldn't say is necessarily going away. I think there were very high figures last year, and that's maybe distorted some of the figures this year, but it's still running at par when the insurance companies decided to make it a high risk area.
Is for security company to be accredited?
I think more for the shipping companies it's important, because I think that, and we certainly see it a lot, there's a lot of companies who behave in a manner they shouldn't. They're breaking rules. They're not purchasing their own equipment, their own guns, making sure that's all licensed either through, if they're a British company, through Britain or through the EU. So I think for shipping companies it's very important to look at accredited companies, because what they then instantly can tell is how they're run, who buy, what their financial status is, and that they actually stick to what they say they're doing, and they're not breaking rules behind the scenes, and they're not purchasing illegal weapons and all of that sort of thing. The vetting, what they would do, they start at sort of very basics. It depends who's looking at doing the accreditation. They would come into your business. They're going to obviously make sure all your legal documents are correct, your SOPs, which include use of force, are correct. They've all been legally, ours have been legally documented with a shipping lawyer in London. It's not just something we've just randomly sort of made up. It is within European conventions and all of this sort of thing. So they would check all of that. They check how we're run. They check how we vet our staff. They would look at all of those procedures inside and out of how we're choosing staff, because ultimately we're putting somebody with a gun on the ship. And then they would really make sure that the business is very robust and it's being run how the paperwork says it's being run. So for instance, we use ISO 9001 to keep that trail, to show anyone vetting us as well how the business is run, and that we are sticking to those rules and sticking to it because it's all documented. They're about to launch, jointly with SAMI, the British Standard ISO, they're about to launch that in conjunction with SAMI, a new standard for the security industry that again will be another vetting process for the security industry. But at the moment I think it's an industry that itself, if businesses are run correctly, wants to be vetted and wants, for a better word, wants the badge, because businesses like mine, we want to show that we stand out from somebody who's doing something and isn't running their business correctly. So I think the industry is looking to be vetted itself, or the good companies in the industry are looking to be vetted themselves. And obviously the bad ones are, but the good ones are. So I think there's a combination of the security companies wanting to be able to hand over something to the shipping companies to say we are one of the top 50 in the world or whatever. And there's a combination between the shipping company who's been bombarded with all these different security companies. Oh my God, which one do I pick? Do I just pick on price? How do I check out? How do I check them out and everything? And I think if somebody's already done that for a CSO or the DPA who's already snowed under with piles of work, that's what's been done for them. This is another reason I feel it's an extra check on us. We use an external training company, and I'll forward you all the details so you've got it all listed. Their training courses are recognised by the IMO. And we use them for a reason. We are one of a very small number, 2 or 3 in the whole world, that uses a system where we don't train our own guards, because it's very easy to put a tick in your own box. If you're busy and you've got lots of work in and you need some people quickly, it's very difficult. It's easy to push people through training courses. So we use an external trainer that has a pass or a fail system, not a we're going to teach you system. A lot of security companies, how they run their training is, you come in, I've got your details, I've got your CV, you were in the Royal Marines, fantastic. Okay, we'll get you on a firing range, you fire your gun and we'll work with you, and if there's any problems, it's not a pass or fail, it's we'll work with you and train you to use a gun. We take a different approach. If you've been in the Royal Marines and you've done the job you say you've done on your CV, I don't need to train you to do that. You should know that. So you're going to come on our course, and if you don't do what it says on your CV, you failed and you can't work for us. And it's 100% have to get pass rate, and that's doing the weapons and a written test, and you're tested on all of our SOPs. You have to be something. obviously, again, with the rules of use of force in place, nothing should escalate really out of control. Whether you get things changing, because obviously at the moment with the risk analysis that's going on, you've got two schools of thought. One is the pirates have given up and gone home, and the other is they're about to come out and start swarming vessels in big numbers, and that will present a whole new set of problems for security. So it depends on obviously looking at that. But where I would say, as long as you're following our rules set down, things shouldn't escalate, because we would use the we would start sounding the ship's horns, trying to make contact, checking. Obviously, our first job is actually, is this a pirate? Because whilst we can tell by how they approach a ship that they probably are, we still have to identify if they are. And a lot of the time, if you identify they are, you get the ship to do certain manoeuvres. You maybe spray the water cannons, sound the horns, do all those things to let them know we know they're there and everything else. And then a lot of the time, it's about demonstrating that we're on board. And that might be just being visual, standing, holding a gun, obviously in body armour and helmets and things. They have a visual thing of, oh, there's an armed guard, and that might that can disperse them.
Yes. Continue communicate with staff on board shipping company, let's say.
Yeah, we would have normally our team leader.
The control center where exactly is?
In terms of how we are. When we're actually on board the vessel and there's a pirate attack, at the end of the day, the control mechanism comes down to our training. The team leader can listen with the captain of the ship. If this is what's happening, the team leader generally will be on the bridge watching what's happening, unless things obviously really escalated. But that's where they'd be working with the captain of that ship. And ultimately, anybody who would fire on a pirate would be doing so in self-defence, which is the rules of the use of force, rather than a navy who can engage because it's a different set of rules. So ultimately, that's they're working in self-defence to defend the ship. But our current experiences are normally by showing them there's armed guards on. There they go. If they don't, a couple of warning shots into the sea beside them, over their heads. It's going to...
Actus, let's say, specialized in some areas or some ships, or can service any kind of ships?
No, any kind of ships. I mean, I'd like to think, obviously, if you have a high-risk product, a gas carrier or something, for instance, that would be when you did use a really, really reputable company that wasn't going to make any mistakes on board. Because you've got potentially sort of explosive stuff sat behind you. But we can work with anything from a fishing vessel up, because obviously, as you know, fishing vessels get taken as motherships. So, and some fishing vessels have £8 or £9 million worth of fish on them at a time. So their cargo is also very valuable. But we can work with any vessel at any size, and that would in some instances, obviously, how many guards are on board depends on speed, freeboard, and all of that sort of thing. So whilst a fishing vessel would be a lot smaller, they're very low in the water, so you have to take that into account. Regulation that would require, if you like, is internationally.
Yes, internationally.
Yeah, is the ICOC. But to be perfectly honest, that is a registry. It isn't a vetting process. So what we're signing up to is obeying certain rules and obeying human rights and all of those sort of things. They do not vet us. We present it to them, and then they put us on their signatory list, but they don't vet. And that is the issue. Is obviously, I don't know, you obviously know about BIMCO's GuardCom, and that is another process of, we work completely within that. In fact, before that came out, we exceeded most of BIMCO's requirements. But that's another way of, if shipping companies use BIMCO to tick a box with us, that they can see that there's a checklist.
I think the competition in your field is tough.
Yes.
More than 50 companies only here in the Greek market offer anti-piracy services. Do you think that this can have an impact on the efficiency of the services offered by the companies?
I think it will have an impact on some.
Yes,
I think that being how the market is at the moment, and I think the escalating costs within the market in terms of a lot of the flag states now require us to be registered with them. So Panama, for instance, has just required us to be registered with them. Well, that's a $10,000 registration fee and a vetting process with them as well. And there's a lot of others like that. I think that there will be standards and problems for some smaller players because of the added costs and the added requirements. Probably 2 years ago, to set up a business like this would probably cost you 60,000 USD. Now you'd be looking probably about I would say if a company says they work to those requirements and you are engaging with that company, you should check they are. Because a lot of the time I find and visibly see with my own eyes, companies that say that they're doing this and they're not. Exactly. And they're cutting corners. Drug and alcohol testing would be an example of that. I don't see where I see shipping companies all around the world have random tests done at portside for their captains or the crew to check for alcohol problems or drug problems. That's an area. So with Actus, for instance, we have a global supplier of that. They don't even tell us when they're going to turn up. They don't tell me. They just turn up. They check my crew randomly at certain points. Have they had a drink? Have they been taking drugs and all that sort of thing? And what I would say, one thing I think you have to be very, very careful in the market at the moment is people saying they're behaving in a particular manner and actually not behaving. When they're on your ship, they're cutting corners. And I think that's maybe where, say for instance, Actus would stand out. That I know that if you deal with me, ultimately, whilst you're dealing with my whole company, you're dealing with me as a person. And I would never, in any aspect of my life, cut corners and do something that, I do things how I say I'm going to do them, that's how it happens. And I would say to shippers, whilst they think they're dealing with a certain thing, they should actually check if that's what they're dealing with. Where I think it would affect somebody's business more oddly is a shipping company if they cut corners. And I'll give you an example. Okay, being a journalist, you'll get this. Look at BP. Biggest British company in the world, one of the biggest companies in the world.
Yes.
Their chief executive nearly brought the company to a close over one sentence, he said, about he wanted his life back.
Yes.
After BP's explosion off the coast of the States. Now, what I would say to any company who, whilst yes, I completely understand, and one thing I've really tried to do is massively engage in where all the costs are for shippers, where the market is, how difficult everything is for them, and I completely understand that, and I know that we're just an added problem in terms of their costings at the moment. But one thing I would say is, if you get it wrong, if you get putting armed guards wrong on your vessel and you're not maintaining certain standards and something does happen and somebody's got a head cam on, somebody's filming it on a mobile phone, one vessel that was hijacked this year, nobody knew, the first thing that happened was it was tweeted out from one of the crew's mobile phones. We can't control exchange of information nowadays, as you're sure you're aware in your job. So I would say, if you cut corners for the sake of saving, a few pennies now, how would that impact your business if you were found to be using guards who are holding illegal guns, not licensed, not trained, and God forbid somebody was killed? How would that impact your share price, your reputation, and everything else about how you trade as a business? Because the cost of that could be a lot greater than the extra few £100 or a few €100 you would spend using the correct company.
Now we're, of course, in Athens, in Greece. Tell us a little bit more about your cooperation with Greek shipping market and how important, let's say, is this market to Actus?
Well, I think the Greek shipping market to Actus is very important. Obviously, first of all, we're all in the European market, so it's nice to be able to trade with other European countries. That's sort of fundamental to how Europe works, or doesn't at the moment, but it should work. But obviously, the Greek shipping market is still a huge market. You're still percentage-wise, the biggest shippers in the world. So for us to have a relationship here with Greek shippers is very, very important. And I think also it's a market where when you meet people, you know, their father owned the business and their grandfather owned the business and their great-grandfather owned the business. And I think it's a market that I want to be able to say, we're not going to be working with you for the next year or two. And whilst East Africa problem may go away, it will come up. Something will happen somewhere else in the world. There's always been piracy, as long as there's been shipping, really. So they sort of go hand in hand. And I watched an interview with a Greek shipper recently, and I can't remember the chap's name, but he was saying, you know, how his father had a relationship with the insurance company they use, and he grew up with the son who now he has that relationship with. So I think it's very important for us to build that relationship and to really maintain it. And it's not just about trying to make money out of this market now. It's about trying to provide a really good price and a really good product, and working with people for the next 10 years, 20 years, if God forbid piracy go on for that long. But it's not just about now, but I think it's a very important market.
Also, the very important market now, it's a very good market, is the piracy, anti-piracy business, anti-piracy industry, let's say. But sooner or later, this phenomenon will decline or will eliminate, let's say. You think that we are close on that, we are far away from that? Actually, finally, a company like Actus or some other company like the Offer Anti-Piracy willing to see...
Yeah, to see if yes.
Finally, because it's a very good business.
Yes, it is. And at the end of the day, that is how we're around, and we make money, and so does any other anti-piracy business. That's how they're trading. And I think that whilst we have this problem at the moment, no, it won't exist forever. I think it's going to, unfortunately, despite what the sort of popular press, like New York Times and things would say, I think unfortunately it's going to be around for some time yet. I don't think it's going to be around necessarily in 10 or 20 years, but I think it's going to be around, for the next 5. I think obviously Somalia's got a new government at the moment. They're cooperating a lot. There's obviously been attacks on Somalia by UN forces and things where they've, bombed shipping vessels and, pirate vessels / shipping vessels on beaches and things, and really trying to deter them. And obviously there's cooperation with Kenya, trying to also do something about Somalia. But likewise, I also look at Somalia and look at its past and look at how it works. And Somalia has been a problem for the last 20/22 years. It's a country that's divided into 3. It has huge social and economic problems. Are they going to be sorted out in the next year? Probably not. It's an ongoing thing. And there's all sorts of other forces in play that keep these things going. But I don't think necessarily it's going to be a problem, possibly past the next 3, 4, 5 years, later on. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I hope it's not going to be, and I genuinely, despite the fact my business is based on it, I genuinely feel complete empathy for people you held. We've been just on board with a chap who was held for 6 months by pirates, and he's had to go back to sea because that's how he feeds his family. And he was a nervous wreck, absolutely. So incredibly worried. If he wasn't working, my team leader said he was on the deck with a set of binoculars he'd bought himself, which cost more than mine. And mine cost about £1,000 a throw. Looking at the horizon with the team leader, because he was so worried about being held again. And ultimately, I, as a human being, I wouldn't want to put another human being through that. And I think it's horrible, and it's a horrid situation for him. The other thing with Actus we're concerned about is you're saying, what happens when all this industry stops? And it's something I'm surprised that no press has picked up on. What happens to all the weapons that are floating around in the Indian Ocean? Because there's banks of them.
Yeah.
Okay, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them that are bought and used by private security. And that was one of my questions. What happens? What's going to happen to the guns if the business stops? How are those businesses that currently are multi-million-pound businesses, and they really are, the top of the tree, they're big, big businesses and making a lot of money. What have they put in place to actually bring those weapons back, destroy them? Because potentially that's another problem area that all those guns could end up being sold for $10 in an African market. And that's another, what happens after, because you're taking it almost a militarised zone down to nothing using companies. And if the companies aren't making money, they'll just shut their businesses down and walk away. But who's going to actually sort all that out?
So, first of all, the solution should start from inside
I think
Somalia,
the solution...
slowly, and after...
And then that will ripple out. At the end of the day, a lawyer in Somalia watched a clip with him talking, and I thought it was a great quote. He said, if the West don't share the fact they're rich with us, you can bet Somalians are going to share the fact they're poor with them. And I thought that's exactly what's happening. He's put it in a sort of one sentence in terms of, yes, actually, they're responding to numerous things that also happen to them. And whilst I wouldn't ever condone piracy, or anything, far from it, his argument was, well, everyone here is so poor, this is why this is happening. Rightly or wrongly, that was his argument. Personally, I think it's wrong, because I think, you need to take responsibility for your own life and live your life in an ethical way, but, some people don't. But I think ultimately, sort Somalia out, and that will ripple out into the sea, effectively. But it will, because if people have got income, got jobs, and can feed their families, they're not going to do it, are they? Hopefully.
Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for your time.